Picture a courtroom in Constantinople. The year is 662 AD, and there's this 82-year-old monk.
Oh, wow. 82.
Yeah, 82. Frail, totally battered from years of imprisonment, and he's dragged before an imperial tribunal. Now, he's not a military rebel, you know? He isn't leading an armed insurrection.
Yeah, he's a scholar.
Exactly, just a scholar. Yet, the Byzantine Empire considers this elderly man so incredibly dangerous to the state that they don't just execute him.
Which would be bad enough.
Right. But they publicly torture him. They drag him out, they sever his tongue so he can no longer speak, and they chop off his right hand so he can no longer write.
It's just brutal.
And then they banish him to die in exile. So you really have to ask yourself, what kind of ideas was this man spreading?
Yeah.
What could a 7th century monk possibly be saying about the universe that would make an entire empire terrified enough to literally butcher him to keep him quiet?
Well, it is truly one of the most brutal and profound moments in early Christian history. And to answer your question, he was defending a vision of human freedom and cosmic architecture that just refused to bow to political compromise.
And the man we're talking about is St. Maximus the Confessor.
That's him. You have to remember, the empire at that time was being torn apart. You had invasions from the Persians and this rapid, terrifying expansion of early Islamic armies.
So everyone is on edge.
Completely. The emperor in Constantinople was absolutely desperate for unity. He wanted this compromised theology to basically hold his fracturing society together.
Specifically regarding Jesus Christ, right?
Right. The state demanded that everyone agree that Christ had only one divine will. They were essentially making his humanity just like a puppet of the divine.
Just a mate suit, basically.
Exactly. But Maximus looked at the emperor and said, absolutely not. Because if Christ does not have a fully functioning, uncompromised human will...
then human freedom means nothing.
Yeah, precisely. If Christ didn't have a human will, then humanity isn't actually saved. So Maximus chose physical mutilation over spiritual surrender.
Man, that is the intense foundation we are standing on today. So our mission for this deep dive is, well, it's profound. We're taking a contemplative, spiritually illuminating journey straight into the heart of reality itself.
Guided by a man who quite literally bled for his convictions.
Right. And we are pulling this from a collection of his writings translated as On the Cosmic Mystery of Jesus Christ. Specifically, we're diving into two of his most complex, mind-bending works.
The Ambigua and the Athalasium.
Yeah, the Ambigua are his explanations of these really difficult theological passages, and the Athalasium are his answers to complex questions posed by a fellow monk named Thalassius.
And, we are exploring these ancient texts because they address a remarkably modern disease.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we live in an age characterized by a profound sense of alienation. We are drowning in an ocean of data, constantly hyper-connected by these glowing screens, yet fundamentally anxious.
We're so fragmented.
We are overloaded with information, but completely starved for meaning. And Maximus, he isn't an abstract philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. He's a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
He's going to show us how a human being actually moves from that state of inner conflict, distraction, and selfish desire toward wholeness, contemplation, and ultimately this staggering concept called communion with God.
To really frame the psychology of this modern fragmentation, the translators of our source text include this brilliant little quote from a 17th century poem.
Oh, the George Herbert one.
Yeah, by George Herbert, titled The Pulley. And I love this because it captures exactly why we feel the way we do when we're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
It's so accurate.
The poem imagines God pouring out blessings on humanity's strength, beauty, wisdom, honor, but God holds back one single blessing.
Rest.
Exactly, rest. God says, let him be rich and weary, that at least, if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast.
It is a profound diagnosis of the human condition. Weariness is the pulley.
And that weariness is exactly what you feel right now. The endless doom scrolling, the anxiety, the jumping from one distraction to another, it isn't just a byproduct of the algorithm.
No, it's deeper than that.
Herbert, and by extension Maximus, is suggesting that our exhaustion is actually a symptom of a soul desperately trying to find its way back to its source, but just looking in all the wrong places.
We are weary by design so that we eventually stop running.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to cure this modern sense of meaninglessness, we first have to completely dismantle the way we currently view the universe.
You really do. We've been trained by centuries of materialism to look at the world around us, the trees, the stars, our own bodies, as essentially cold, dead matter.
Just atoms bumping into each other on an accidental stage?
Exactly. But Maximus looks at the universe and sees something entirely different. He sees a sacramental reality.
Okay, what does that mean in practical terms?
For Maximus, the universe is deeply symbolic. It is literally vibrating with divine presence. It's this woven fabric of meaning. And to grasp this, we have to explore his foundational architecture of reality.
The concepts of the logos and the logoi.
Yes.
Let's define the terms for everyone. The logos with a capital L and the logo with a lowercase l.
Okay, so in Greek philosophy and early Christian theology, the logos is the divine word, the ultimate principle of reason and order, which Christians identify as the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ.
He is the center holding the cosmos together.
Right. But Maximus takes this and sort of explodes it outward by emphasizing the logo. These are the inner principles, the distinct divine intentions, the unique blueprints of all created things.
So before time even began.
The logo of every single thing, angels, humans, animals, the visible and the invisible, they were all securely fixed in the mind of God.
Okay, is it like, let me try an analogy here. Is it like the source code of a massive complex video game where every single leaf and character has a specific line of code, the logos, tying it back to the master program, the logos?
That's actually a great way to think about it.
Yes.
But what's fascinating here is that the source code isn't cold logic. It's pure, active, loving providence.
An intention.
Exactly. The logoi are the reasons why a thing exists and the ultimate goal toward which it is being drawn. And Maximus makes a staggering claim here. He says that the Logos Christ actually undergoes multiple incarnations throughout reality.
Wait, multiple incarnations, not just Bethlehem.
Right. He is incarnated first in the physical world through these locales of creation. The universe itself is his first embodiment.
Oh, wow.
Then he is incarnated in the spiritual meanings of the words of Scripture. And supremely, he is incarnated historically in the flesh as Jesus Christ.
So if everything in the universe is perfectly coded with this divine intention and every single thing is being drawn back to the logos, that completely changes how we should interact with reality.
It has to change it.
We shouldn't just be consuming the world. We should be reading it. I'm not just looking at biology when I see a tree. I'm looking at a divine intention.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, this incredibly beautiful, harmonized view of the universe was actually Maximus's weapon against a very bleak philosophy that was popular in his day.
The Origenist worldview.
Yes. Maximus is vehemently rejecting a theology promoted by the followers of an earlier thinker named Origen.
Right. And the Origenists had this massive philosophical problem, didn't they?
They did. They looked at the messiness, the pain, and the heavy physical reality of the world, and they couldn't figure out why a perfect God would create something so dense and difficult.
So what was their solution?
Their solution was essentially a myth of cosmic boredom. They believed that long before the physical universe existed, all of our souls existed as pure, disembodied minds.
Just floating around in the spiritual realm, resting in perfect unity with God.
Right. But then, these pure minds experienced the phenomenon they called koros. Yeah, it's a Greek term meaning satiety, surfeit, or to put it bluntly, boredom. These minds stared at the divine light for so long that they got sated. They grew tired of contemplating God, they grew cold, and they fell away.
And to catch them, God creates the physical universe.
Exactly. To punish or correct them, God creates the material universe and traps these fallen minds inside heavy physical bodies.
That makes the entire material world a cosmic penalty box.
It's profoundly pessimistic.
It really is. It means my body, the earth, the trees, the oceans, they aren't inherently good. They are just the walls of a prison designed to hold a bored, fallen ghost. That is an incredibly depressing way to view human existence.
Completely. And in his work, Ambiguum 7, Maximus completely dismantles this Origenist myth. He attacks the very premise of koros.
He says it's impossible, right?
Yes, he argues that it is philosophically, logically, and spiritually impossible to get bored with an infinite, supremely beautiful God.
Because the Origenists assumed a sequence of existence that started with rest, followed by movement away from God, which led to the creation of the world.
And Maximus reverses the polarity entirely. He says the true sequence is coming into being, followed by movement toward God, leading ultimately to rest in God.
Because God is infinite. Let's really think about what infinity means here. If I eat my favorite meal, let's say a massive, perfectly cooked steak, the first few bites are pure joy.
Right.
But by the time I'm finishing the plate, I'm done. I have experienced koros. I am sated. My physical capacity has a hard limit.
Yeah, your stomach can only hold so much.
Exactly. But Maximus is saying that because God has absolutely no limits, our spiritual capacity to consume his goodness can never hit a wall.
Precisely. And Maximus coins a brilliant paradoxical phrase for this state. He calls God the ever-moving repose.
Ever-moving repose. Okay, I need to push back on the physics of that phrase.
Go for it.
It sounds like a contradiction. If I am in repose, if I am resting, my movement has stopped. If I am moving, I am inherently not at rest. How can a soul be doing both simultaneously?
It is the ultimate mystical paradox.
Yeah.
In our finite world, movement implies a lack. You move toward the kitchen because you lack food.
Right.
Once you get the food, you stop moving.
Right.
But in the infinite reality of God, you are moving not out of lack, but out of an ever-expanding capacity for love. As you move deeper into God, your desire is simultaneously fulfilled perfectly and yet expanded infinitely.
Oh, wow.
You are resting from the anxious, erratic, fragmented movements of worldly life, the doom-scrolling, the chasing of status, but you are perpetually moving deeper into the inexhaustible mystery of the divine. You are, as Maximus beautifully puts it, uncontainably contained.
Uncontainably contained. It means deification. The ultimate goal of the human soul isn't a static standstill. It isn't sitting on a cloud strumming a harp for eternity.
Not at all.
It is an eternal, dynamic, thrilling exploration of infinite love. You never reach the bottom of the ocean.
Exactly. But, this soaring cosmic vision immediately brings us crashing back down to the reality of our daily lives.
Yeah, because if the universe is a symphony of logoi, and our ultimate destiny is this dynamic, thrilling union with God, why does life down here feel so agonizingly fragmented?
Right. Why do we experience so much pain, anxiety, and chaos?
If the master blueprint is perfect, why is the building currently on fire?
To understand the chaos, we have to look at the center of the architecture, which is the human person. We have to look at what humanity was designed to be and the tragedy of the fall.
Okay.
Maximus describes the human being as a microcosm, literally a small universe or a second cosmos.
We are the bridge.
We are the ultimate synthesis.
Yeah.
Look at how we are constructed. We have heavy material bodies made of the earth, sharing the same physical elements as animals and rocks.
Right.
Yet we possess an intellectual, spiritual soul breathed into us by God, sharing the contemplative capacities of the angels. We stand perfectly on the frontier between the visible and the invisible, the material and the spiritual.
Which completely elevates the physical body. Unlike those Origenists who said the body is a punishment, Maximus insists that body and soul belong together.
Indissolubly linked.
You aren't a ghost driving a meat skeleton. The human being is a single, integrated species. And our job, our cosmic vocation, was to take the material world, harmonize it with the spiritual world through love, and offer the whole beautifully unified cosmos back to God.
We were supposed to be the priests of creation.
Right. We failed.
We did. In his text Ad Salacium 61, Maximus details the catastrophic failure of that mission. He analyzes the fall of Adam, and he uses a phrase that is quite startling. He says that Adam lapsed at the instant he was created.
At the instant he was created? That's fascinating. It implies he didn't even make it a day.
Right.
He didn't have years of walking in paradise before making a mistake. It means humanity derailed before we even left the station.
It's his theological way of saying humanity never achieved its intended destiny. God created human beings with a natural capacity for spiritual pleasure, the sublime, fulfilling joy of communion with the divine.
But instead of using it for that,
Instead of using that capacity to look upward and draw the physical creation toward God, Adam turned his attention downward. He became infatuated with the sensory, material surface of the world.
he tried to find infinite satisfaction in finite things.
Exactly. He chose unnatural sensory pleasure over natural spiritual joy.
He looked at the tapestry of reality, and instead of seeing the intention of the weaver, he just became obsessed with the shiny threads. He treated the symbol as the ultimate reality.
Yes.
And this catastrophic shift introduces a concept in Maximus's thought that I think perfectly diagnoses modern anxiety. He calls it the gnomic will, or what we might translate today as the deliberative will.
This is a crucial pivot in human psychology. Originally, human nature possessed a natural will, a fundamental, unhesitating drive toward God and the good.
It was an intuitive orientation.
But after the fall, because we lost our direct, intuitive spiritual vision, our will became stunted, fragmented, and blind. We developed this deliberative will.
The wavering, hesitating faculty of choice.
Right. It is the will that has to agonize between options, constantly distracted by illusions, trying to guess what will actually bring us happiness.
Let me map this onto something incredibly mundane to see if it holds up. Think about the paralysis you feel standing in the cereal aisle of a massive supermarket.
Okay, the cereal aisle.
You have 100 different brightly colored boxes screaming for your attention. You stand there deliberating, completely overwhelmed by choice, trying to figure out which combination of sugar and grain is going to satisfy you.
Yeah, we've all been there.
And we tend to view having all those choices as the ultimate definition of freedom. But through Maximus's lens, that deliberation isn't freedom. It's a symptom of our blankness.
Exactly.
True freedom would be naturally, instantly knowing exactly what is good for you and effortlessly choosing it. Our deliberative will is operating in the dark, constantly being seduced by shiny packaging.
That is a brilliant application. The deliberative will is the engine of our anxiety. And because Adam chose to pursue this unnatural sensory pleasure, which Maximus calls hedon in Greek, God introduced a profound corrective measure to human nature.
What was the corrective measure?
God attached pain or odyne and mortality to our nature.
Let me stop you there, because framing pain as a corrective measure introduced by God sounds incredibly harsh to modern ears. It sounds like God saying, you broke the rules, now I'm going to hurt you.
It's not an arbitrary vindictive punishment, though. It is an ontological safeguard, a law of spiritual physics.
Okay, how so?
Because humanity tried to force finite material things to provide infinite satisfaction, the inevitable physical result of that friction is pain and corruption. You cannot extract the infinite from the finite.
The math just doesn't work.
Right. The pursuit of unnatural pleasure necessarily yields pain. If God had not attached pain to our nature, our pursuit of sensory pleasure would be limitless, and we would essentially consume ourselves and the cosmos into absolute annihilation.
So pain is the boundary line that stops the disease from becoming infinite.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? This dynamic, this dialectic of pleasure and pain is exactly what we were talking about at the very beginning of this deep dive. Think about the modern dopamine loop.
Oh, yeah.
When you feel pain, anxiety, loneliness, or that deep existential emptiness, what is the immediate knee-jerk reaction? You reach for your phone, you seek out a quick hit of pleasure,
A notification, a scroll through social media.
a purchase on Amazon, a glass of wine. You seek out hedon, sensory pleasure to numb the pain. But what happens?
It doesn't last.
That quick hit doesn't actually cure the emptiness. It wears off and it leaves behind a deeper sense of isolation, a worse hangover, which is more pain. So you need a bigger hit of pleasure to numb the new pain. It creates an endless, exhausting, accelerating cycle.
This is the tragic treadmill of fallen humanity. Maximus says we are trapped in a cycle of birth driven by sexual pleasure, leading inevitably to corruption and death.
We are trying to cure the disease of pain with the very pleasure that causes it.
It is an inescapable dialectic. Our liability to these passions, our daily struggles with anxiety and addiction, are not just matters of having weak willpower or needing better habits. It is an existential disease woven into the fabric of our fallen nature.
If the situation is that deeply entrenched, how do we get out? If we are fundamentally broken at the level of our will, spinning in this hamster wheel of pleasure and pain, what is the prescription?
Well, it requires work.
Does Maximus just tell us to hate ourselves? Because if you look at a lot of ancient asceticism, monks living in caves, fasting from it can look to an outsider like it's just about crushing the human spirit and hating the physical body.
This is where Maximus reveals himself, not just as a theologian, but as a masterful psychologist of the soul. He does not preach self-hatred. He preaches radical transformation through ascetic struggle.
Okay, what does that look like?
In Ad Thalassium 1, a monk asks him a very direct, practical question. Are the passions, things like intense desire, fear, grief, and anger, are they inherently evil?
And you would expect a monk to say, yes, absolutely, crush them.
But he doesn't. Maximus says, no, they are not inherently evil. They are unnatural additions to our original design. Yes, they are the result of the fall. But because they are now part of our reality, they can be harnessed.
So they aren't to be annihilated.
No, they are to be converted.
So it isn't about suppression. It sounds almost like a spiritual martial art. In judo, you don't stand there and try to block a heavier opponent's momentum with brute force.
Right, you'd get crushed.
You take their momentum, you pivot, and you redirect their raw energy to throw them. Maximus is saying you take the raw, chaotic energy of your selfish desire and you redirect it into a passionate, consuming longing for the divine.
That is precisely the mechanic he describes. Maximus notes that those who are spiritually earnest use their passions strategically. They don't let the passions use them.
Can you give an example of how that works?
Sure. They take worldly fear, the anxiety about losing money or status, and they transmute it into a reverent, cautious awe of God that keeps them from sinning.
Oh, well.
They take worldly grief, the sorrow of losing material things, and they convert it into a healing, purifying repentance. He uses a vivid medical analogy. He compares this process to wise physicians who extract the deadly poison of a viper and turn it into antivenom. Exactly. Through careful alchemy, they synthesize it into a life-saving antivenom. The very poison that was killing us becomes the cure.
That reframes our inner life completely. It means your profound anxiety, your deep yearning, your grief, they aren't just obstacles preventing you from being spiritual.
Well, they are tools.
They're massive reservoirs of raw energy, just waiting to be given the correct infinite target. But doing that requires intense mental discipline, doesn't it?
It requires an unyielding vigilance over the mind. To illustrate this inner alchemy, Maximus offers a breathtaking allegorical reading of a very bizarre, often ignored biblical story in Ad Thalassium 17.
Okay, what's the story?
It is the story from Exodus 4 involving Moses, his wife Zipporah, and the sudden bloody circumcision of their son at an inn on the way to Egypt.
Yeah, that is definitely one of those intense, violent Old Testament narratives that you don't usually hear preached on a Sunday morning. It seems totally chaotic.
It does on the surface.
God commissions Moses to go to Egypt and free the Israelites. Moses packs up his family and heads out. But on the journey, God, or an angel of the Lord, suddenly attacks Moses and threatens to kill him.
Right.
And his wife Zipporah grabs a sharp flint stone, circumcises their son, touches the foreskin to Moses' feet, and the angel backs off. How does a 7th century monk interpret that?
He reads it as a profound, high-stakes map of human psychology. In Maximus's allegory, Moses represents the intellect, the mind.
Okay.
The mind is being commissioned by God to descend into the Egypt of the heart, the dense realm of the flesh, the passions, and the senses, in order to bring order and liberation.
So Moses is the mind going into the messy heart. What's the son?
The uncircumcised child represents our impure, worldly thoughts and our untamed passions. Zipporah represents divine wisdom.
And the angel?
The angel threatening death represents the human conscience, striking us when we stall out, compromise, or fail to purify our intentions.
I want to make sure I'm mapping this correctly. The ascetic life, the pursuit of wholeness, requires a violent circumcision of your own thoughts.
Yes.
You have to take the sharp stone of faith and cut away the superficial, fleshy, distracting layers of your mind to find the divine logoi hiding underneath.
That's beautifully put.
And the threat of death from the angel means this isn't a casual hobby. If you stall out, your conscience will tear you apart.
Notice the urgency of the threat in the story. The attack comes because Moses stalls on the journey. He hesitates. Maximus warns his readers that you cannot stall out in the spiritual life. You cannot coast.
Because if you start moving, you start sinking.
He writes that the immobility of virtue is the beginning of vice. The soul must be in perpetual motion toward God.
Right. Because the moment you stop actively moving toward the infinite, the gravity of the finite pulls you right back down. If you stop swimming, you sink back into the cycle of pleasure and pain. So, to keep us moving, to guide this perpetual motion, Maximus outlines a roadmap of spiritual progress, right?
Yes, drawing from his commentary on the prophet Jonah in Ad Thalassium 64, he breaks human progress down into 3 stages, which he calls the 3 laws: the natural law, the scriptural law, and the law of grace.
Let's walk through these because it feels like a ladder of human development. Start with the natural law.
The natural law is the baseline of human existence. It is human reason taking control of the irrational animal senses.
Okay.
It is essentially the basic golden rule, recognizing our shared human nature and treating others with basic equity. It's about self-control, ensuring that your desire for pleasure doesn't cause you to exploit your neighbor.
It's essentially how to be a decent, rational person. Don't steal, don't lash out in anger, pay your taxes. It is the foundation of a civil society.
Right.
But Maximus says we can't stop there.
We cannot. The next step up the ladder is the scriptural law, the law given through revelation. This stage moves us from mere behavioral equity to internal spiritual desire.
So it's more about the heart?
Exactly. It often begins with a fear of divine judgment, the fear of God. But as the soul matures, that fear evolves into a deep, mutual love for your neighbor. You aren't just controlling your senses to avoid harming them. You are actively desiring the good of the other person. You are following the commandments out of love.
But there is still a massive leap required to reach the summit, isn't there? Because being a good citizen and even loving your neighbor is still operating within the bounds of standard human capacity. What is the final law?
The pinnacle is the law of grace. This is where human effort is entirely transcended by divine imitation. It means imitating Christ's radical sacrificial love.
How is it different from the scriptural law?
Well, under the natural law, you treat others equally. Under the scriptural law, you love your neighbor as yourself. But under the law of grace, you love your neighbor more than yourself.
Wow.
You are willing to lay down your life for them, just as Christ did. It is a profound, self-emptying love that actually deifies human nature, elevating it beyond its natural limits.
That completely shatters the ceiling of modern self-improvement. So much of our culture's focus today is stuck on the natural law. How to optimize your habits, how to be more productive, how to set healthy boundaries.
It's very egocentric.
Right. It's all about making the ego more comfortable. But Maximus is saying the goal of existence isn't optimization. The goal is total transformation. You are called to a self-emptying love that is literally divine.
It's a much higher calling.
But this brings us to a massive theological wall. We can practice the martial arts of the passions. We can circumcise our thoughts. We can strive for the law of grace. But no matter how much ascetic struggle we engage in, we cannot fix the broken machinery of the universe on our own.
No, we can't.
We cannot break that fundamental mechanism of the pleasure-pain cycle because the disease is ontological. It's in our nature.
You have hit the exact limit of human capacity. Human ascetic effort is absolutely necessary. We must purify our will, but it is ultimately insufficient to heal the dismayings of human nature. We cannot pull ourselves out of the swamp by our own hair. Breaking the cycle required a cosmic intervention. And we connect this to the bigger picture. This is where Christ, the Logos, who is the center and purpose of all reality, physically steps onto the stage of human history.
I want to clarify something massive here about the incarnation. When we think about the story of Jesus coming to Earth, it is almost always framed as God's plan B.
Oh, yes.
God created Adam and Eve, they ate the apple, broke the world, and God said, "Oh no, they ruined it. I better go down there and fix this mess." But Maximus rejects that completely, doesn't he?
He rejects it entirely. This is one of the most majestic, mind-expanding aspects of his theology. In Athanasium 60, Maximus states explicitly that Christ is the mystery hidden before the ages.
Meaning it was always the plan.
Yes. Before the universe was even spoken into existence, before the first star was formed, God's ultimate intention was to unite finitude and infinity, to bridge measure and immeasurability, to join the Creator and the creation.
The incarnation of the Logos was always the ultimate goal of the cosmos. It is the reason the universe was built.
Precisely.
So even if Adam had never fallen, even if humanity had perfectly fulfilled its role as the microcosm, the Logos still would have become incarnate to unite creation to God.
That is the profound implication. The universe was designed from the beginning for union with God through Christ. However, because humanity did fall, because we shattered our nature and trapped ourselves in the dialectic of pleasure and pain, the incarnation had to take on a specific, therapeutic, and agonizing mission.
He had to become a doctor.
He didn't just unite divinity to a pristine theoretical human nature floating in the ether. He came down into the hospital ward. He healed it from the inside out.
How exactly?
In Athanasium 21 and 61, Maximus delves into the precise mechanics of this healing. He says Christ assumed our passible human nature.
Passible meaning capable of suffering.
Yes. Christ took on flesh that could feel hunger, thirst, exhaustion, fear, and excruciating pain.
Wait, if Christ was sinless, how could he put off the powers and principalities? Didn't he have to put them on first?
Let me pose a critical question here, because this is where the theology gets incredibly tense. Okay, let's hear it.
We established earlier that humanity is broken because our will is stunted. We have this deliberative, hesitant, gnomic will that constantly chooses sensory pleasure and falls into sin.
Right.
But Orthodox theology insists Christ was totally sinless. His human will was perfectly aligned with his divine will. He didn't have that broken, wavering, deliberative will.
He did not.
So if he didn't have the internal brokenness that we have, how could he actually relate to our struggle? How could he defeat the dark powers and principalities of this world if he didn't have the weakness they exploit? How do you heal a disease if you refuse to catch the virus?
That is the exact theological riddle Maximus is solving, and his answer is a stroke of absolute genius. He explains that Christ willingly submitted to the post-lapsarian mode of human birth.
The messy, painful reality of a human mother.
Exactly. He entered the world through that mode specifically to take on our liability to suffering. He did not inherit the guilt of Adam. He did not inherit the irresistible, broken drive toward unnatural pleasure. But he willingly, freely adopted the pain and the mortality that were the consequences of that fall.
He steps onto the battlefield completely unarmed. He deliberately assumes the weakness of the flesh without the sin of the flesh.
Precisely. And by doing so, he laid a trap. He allowed the demonic powers, the principalities of this world, the forces of corruption to attack him through his physical passions.
Like in the desert.
Yes, think of his temptation in the desert. He was starving after 40 days. The powers attacked his passible nature, trying to use his intense physical hunger to force his will to waver.
Or in Gethsemane.
Or think of his agony in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was literally sweating blood in the visceral human terror of impending torture and death. The powers were trying to make him choose self-preservation over obedience, pleasure over pain.
They were throwing everything they had at his human survival instincts. But because he had no broken deliberative will, because his natural human will was perfectly, seamlessly aligned with the divine, he never flinched.
He felt the terror, he felt the hunger, but he never sinned.
He endured the absolute maximum force of human suffering, and his will never broke.
And by suffering their attacks without ever yielding, he exhausted their power. Maximus uses language that almost sounds like a cosmic heist. He says Christ duped the dark powers.
You duped them.
Yes. They saw his weak, suffering human flesh, and they swallowed the bait of his human vulnerability. But hidden inside that vulnerability was the hook of his divine invincibility. They swallowed the bait, and they were pierced by the hook.
That is an incredible image, but we have to connect the dots to our own lives. How does Christ exhausting the demonic powers on the cross actually break the cycle of pleasure and pain for you and me? How does it fix the machinery?
He fixed it by completely subverting the mechanism of cosmic justice that upheld the cycle. Remember how the cycle operated. Unrighteous sensory pleasure inevitably brings the just punishment of pain and death. That was the law of the universe since Adam. But Christ was born without the unrighteous pleasure of Adam. His conception bypassed the old fallen cycle of sensual pleasure. He had no sin. Therefore, his suffering and his death were completely, totally unjust.
Because he never triggered the cause, he never should have had to suffer the effect. Death had no legal claim on him.
Exactly. And by voluntarily submitting to an utterly unjust death, he short-circuited the entire system. He broke the necessary ironclad link between pleasure and pain.
He turned death against itself.
He took death, which up until that Friday afternoon had been the ultimate punishment, the ultimate weapon of corruption against humanity, and he turned it inside out. He used death as the very weapon that destroys sin. He conquered death by death.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you, the listener, to really sit with the implications of this because it changes everything about how you experience the world. This isn't just an abstract legal transaction happening in the cloud.
Not at all.
It changes the fundamental molecular nature of human suffering. It means that the pain you experience in your life, your physical illness, your grief, your anxiety, your daily ascetic struggles, when you willingly unite that suffering to Christ, it is no longer just a meaningless punishment. It isn't just a tragic accident of biology.
It becomes the very vehicle for your spiritual rebirth. Because Christ transformed passibility, your trials are now participating in his cosmic victory.
The pain that used to destroy humanity is now the crucible that purifies it.
Death and suffering are no longer a dead end. They are the doorway to deification.
Which brings us to the ultimate, staggering destination of this entire cosmic journey. The door of the prison has been kicked open from the inside, human nature has been healed, and now you and I, in our daily lives, are invited to cross the threshold and participate in the actual life of God.
This is the concept at the very heart of Eastern Christian mysticism.
Theosis.
Theosis, or deification. It is the boldest, most awe-inspiring claim of Maximus's theology. God became human so that humans might become God. Maximus outlines the itinerary for this journey in 3 distinct stages in Ambiguum 42. He calls them being, well-being, and eternal well-being.
Map these out for us. What does the journey actually look like?
The first stage is simply being. This is our creation, our origin in existence. We did nothing to earn it. It is a pure, gratuitous gift of love from God.
Okay, that's step 1.
The second stage is well-being. This is inaugurated by our baptismal birth and lived out through the grueling, beautiful reality of our ascetic struggle. It is the arena of our daily lives.
So Tuesday morning traffic, dealing with a difficult boss, resisting scrolling.
Exactly. It is where we use our free will, aided continually by divine grace, to redirect our passions, circumcise our thoughts, and align our lives with the unique divine logoi intended for us.
Well-being is the heavy lifting. It's the daily grind of moving from the natural law to the scriptural law to the terrifying self-emptying of the law of grace.
Yes, it is the active phase of virtue. And it culminates, ultimately, in the third stage, eternal well-being.
The resurrection.
Right. It is the eschatological reality where the human person, having purified their capacity for God, is fully and permanently infused with the divine presence.
Now, when people in the modern world hear words like deification or becoming God, it can trigger a few different reactions.
Usually pretty skeptical ones.
Yeah. Some might think of Eastern monism, where a drop of water falls into the ocean and completely loses its individual identity, dissolving into the cosmic soup. Others might think it sounds incredibly arrogant, like, we are trying to usurp the creator.
But deification in Maximus's vision doesn't mean you stop being human.
Let me offer an analogy that early church fathers loved to use. Imagine a cold, dark, heavy iron sword.
Okay.
You take that iron sword and you plunge it into a blazing, roaring fire. As the iron sits in the flames, it begins to change. It becomes glowing hot.
It takes on the properties of the fire.
Exactly. It radiates intense heat. It glows with blinding light. It can instantly burn anything it touches. But the iron doesn't magically turn into fire. It doesn't cease to be an iron sword.
It remains completely iron.
But it is totally saturated, penetrated, and animated by the fire.
That is the perfect analogy for theosis. The essence of the iron remains iron, just as the essence of humanity remains human. You do not lose your personality, your memories, or your distinct created nature.
But the energies of the fire penetrate the iron completely.
In the state of eternal well-being, the uncreated energies of God permeate your soul. And through your soul, they permeate your physical body. You remain fully human, but you become God by grace.
You are granted immortality, impassibility, and the unadulterated dynamic joy of divine life.
But reaching that state of eternal well-being requires something incredibly difficult on our part. It is the ultimate test of the will. It requires what Maximus calls willing surrender.
Surrender is so hard for us.
It is. At the absolute apex of the spiritual journey, human effort must cease. The ascetic struggle of well-being gives way to the passive receptivity of eternal well-being.
You just have to let go.
The human will must voluntarily, joyfully surrender to God, completely free of any opposition, hesitation, or resistance. The Holy Spirit transfigures the mind, and you allow yourself to be uncontainably contained by the divine. You cease your own anxious labor, and you enter into the ever-moving repose.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, as you navigate the noise and the chaos of the modern world. Are you willing to surrender?
It's a terrifying thought.
Are you willing to let go of your frantic, self-directed, ego-driven attempts to control your own happiness? Are you willing to stop deliberating in the cereal aisle of life and instead find your rest in the ultimate infinite beauty of God? Because that level of surrender is terrifying. It means letting go of the illusions of the deliberative will that we cling to for safety.
It is terrifying to the frail human ego, yes, but it is the birth of true, unshakable freedom. And the force that makes this terrifying surrender possible, the cosmic virtue that harmonizes all of these stages, is love.
Agape.
For Maximus, love is not just a warm sentiment or an emotion. It is the highest form of knowledge. Love is the state where the knower and the known are perfectly united.
It is love that gives us the strength to redirect the passions.
It is love that fulfills the radical demands of the law of grace, and it is love that permanently binds the human person to the Trinity in the eternal state of theosis.
So let's pull all these massive cosmic threads together and bring this journey to a close. We started by diagnosing a very specific, very modern feeling, that deep weariness, alienation, and fragmentation that washes over you when you are doom-scrolling through a noisy, overconnected world.
And we feel that anxiety because we are caught in a broken, fallen cycle.
Chasing quick hits of sensory pleasure to numb our existential pain, which only breeds more pain and deeper isolation.
But St. Maximus the Confessor, speaking to us across 14 centuries, offers a majestic, sweeping alternative. You are not an isolated, meaningless speck of dust wandering through a cold, accidental universe.
You are a microcosm.
You are the vital bridge between the material earth and the spiritual heavens. And the agonizing cycle of pleasure and pain that oppresses you has already been shattered from the inside out by the Logos, Jesus Christ.
He took on your vulnerability. He exhausted the power of the darkness. He took the ultimate punishment of death and turned it into the very doorway to eternal life. which means your daily quiet struggles, your attempts to be patient with your family, to love sacrificially, to redirect your fears and anxieties toward prayer, they aren't just trivial moments of self-improvement.
They are profound actions within a cosmic drama of reconciliation. Every genuine act of love, every moment of true, quiet contemplation helps to heal the division in the world.
You are actively participating in drawing the entire universe back to its creator. It is a breathtaking, beautiful vision of reality. And as we leave you today, I want to give you one final, lingering thought to mull over. Maximus says that the logos of your very existence, the specific divine idea of you, was securely held in the mind of God before the stars were even formed.
You are quite literally a created portion of God.
So as you go about your day-to-day, when you inevitably encounter the mundane frustrations, the digital noise, and the modern anxieties that try to shatter your peace, ask yourself this. What would happen to your anxiety if you stopped viewing yourself as a fragmented consumer of information and started viewing yourself as a living, breathing symbol, actively being drawn back into the eternal, ever-moving repose of divine love?